April 5th, 2021. The FBI received a tip-off that a neonatal doctor from Spokane has hired a hitman through the dark web to kidnap his ex-wife. The tip-off came from an unlikely source, a journalist from the BBC who had been investigating murder-for-hire services on the dark web. The journalist had warned the target of the hit, providing her with a document detailing the deal struck with the hitman and the proof of the funds transferred, who in turn, through her attorney, informed the FBI. The doctor had used a moniker, Scar 215, and fortunately, the journalists had identified someone who they believed to have been the man behind the order. Dr. Ronald Ilg. The chase was on for the FBI to apprehend Ronald before he tried to run, as the investigators grappled with pressing questions. Has Ronald ordered any more hits? Who are the targets, and why? All that and more coming right up. But before we explore this case any further, my name's Joshua Miles and I cover lesser-known true crime cases from all corners of the world here on my YouTube channel. If that's something that you think you'd be interested in, then please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss out on any true crime cases. With that being said, let's delve straight into the case of Dr. Ronald Ilg. It's important to note that some names have been changed in this coverage to protect the identities of witnesses, victims, and minors. Further to that, some sources have not been disclosed due to them containing private and personal information about the witnesses, victims, and minors. Ronald Craig Ilg was born on the 20th of August 1966 in Bellingham, Washington, to parents Dorothy and Anthony Ilg. He was the sixth of 8 children born to the family, and he was raised in what he would later describe as a small farming community in the Willamette Valley of Oregon. Ronald attended Silverton Union High School in Silverton, Oregon from 1981 to 1985, before going on to Chemeketa Community College in Salem from 1985 to 86. He then went on to study a Bachelor of Science in Biology at Western Oregon State College, from which he graduated in 1989 with honors. Following that, Ronald studied at Oregon Health Sciences University School of Medicine in Portland from 1990 to 94, and he graduated from there with his MD. He completed his pediatric internship and residency from 94 to 1997 at Oregon Health Sciences University, where he won the Resident Research Award in 1997. Between 97 and the year 2000, Ronald worked as a partner of general pediatric practice at Childhood Health Associates of Salem. From the year 2000 to 2003, Ronald conducted his fellowship as part of the Oregon Health and Science University Perinatal Neonatal Fellowship Program. It was after completing that fellowship program that Ronald moved to Spokane in 2003 to practice neonatology. So it's fair to say that he was a considerably well-qualified neonatal doctor, and he fairly quickly gained a great reputation in his local community. It had also been in 2003 when Ronald had married his first wife, a woman who we'll call Beth for the purposes of privacy protection. It's not publicly known when the pair met or how they met, but what we do know is that they eloped on the 19th of March 2003 in Clark County, Nevada. At that time, Ronald had been working as an MD at Northwest Neonatology Associates in Spokane. The following year, in 2004, Beth and Ronald welcomed their son, who we'll call Edward for privacy protection, into the world. And it seems that the young family had been thriving. On the 31st of August 2005, Ronald's employer, Northwest Neonatology Associates, was acquired by Pediatrics, who subsequently hired Ronald to work as a neonatologist with its Spokane-based practice group. It's important to note that Pediatrics had a business relationship with a company called Medmax, who provided management and other administrative services to them. And it was by that point that he had begun bringing home the big money. Ronald quickly rose through the ranks and became involved in leadership positions within Pediatrics, which included additional duties and, naturally, increases in his compensation. We don't know all too much about Ronald and Beth's relationship during this time, but as the years progressed, it appeared that there had been an underlying turmoil. We do know that it had been in 2011 when Ron had met a woman who we'll call Claire for the purposes of privacy protection, and Claire would become a very important person in Ron's life. It is clear that a relationship between Claire and Ron began to grow, And though we can't say for certain, this likely had an impact on Ron's marriage to Beth. And on the 20th of August 2012, Ron and Beth officially separated and moved into separate residences, and divorce proceedings commenced. On the 1st of January 2013, Ron was promoted to lead the Spokane group of pediatrics as its corporate medical director. And the following year, on the 2nd of October 2014, the divorce between Ron and Beth finalized. It's interesting to note that Ron's new girlfriend Claire did have 2 children from a previous marriage, and one of them had to go live with their father as they didn't get along with Ron. On the 5th of November 2016, Claire and Ron got married in Spokane County, Washington. In May of 2018, Claire and Ron welcomed their son Ryan into the world. Ryan being a fake name, obviously for privacy protection reasons. Claire subsequently took 2 months off of school as she was still studying at the time to be with Ryan. And Ron also took a couple of weeks off from work to help too, as he should. That is the bare minimum there. The couple were in the fortunate position that they were able to hire a live-in nanny so that Claire could go back to school and continue her studies to become an esthetician after her maternity leave was over. Claire's schooling took place between 9 a.m. and about 3:30 p.m. and so she was able to be at home with Ryan in the afternoons and the evenings. Ron would help out with the childcare if he had the night off or if he hadn't been on call. So it must be noted that Claire was evidently the primary parent. Ronald had worked at Deaconess Hospital and Sacred Heart Medical Center under pediatrics in Spokane as a neonatologist, and he held numerous certifications. And so he had been working 24-hour shifts a few times a week and only had time off every 5 to 6 weeks. The nanny that they had hired had a full apartment that was located over Ron and Claire's garage, and she was paid a full salary. Though in July of 2018, this nanny actually quit, giving no notice, due to the fact that she not only needed more income, but because Ron had made her feel uncomfortable with his forward and blunt text messages. Not long after this nanny quit, in September of 2018, they hired a second live-in nanny by the name of Laura. In November of that same year, Claire finished school and went on to find a job at a spa in January of 2019. In May of 2019, a complaint was received by Medmax and Pediatrics, Ronald's employer, which alleged harassment from Ronald towards a co-worker. A second complaint was also filed against Ronald shortly after the first, though this one was more about how Ronald carried out his responsibilities. Ronald's employer did think it odd that both complaints had been received within such a short time and considered a potential, quote, red flag in regards to the legitimacy of the complaints. Ron's employer began their investigations into these complaints, and while this was happening, Ronald's second marriage to Claire had been pretty rough. It was at some point in the first half of 2019 when Ronald brought a third person into the marriage, a woman who we'll call Angela for the purposes of privacy protection, and Ronald commenced an intimate relationship with Angela. It must be noted that Angela had apparently also been married at the time, so yikes. Now, according to court records, Ron bringing this other woman into the relationship ended up causing constant arguments between Ronald and Claire, but it seems that Ronald was set on this new girlfriend. On the 2nd of August 2019, Claire discovered a GPS tracking device hidden in her car. When she confronted Ron about this device, he actually accused Claire of taking the GPS tracker off of the car and told her that if she did actually do that, then he would hardwire one to her car. He explains that he needed it to be sure that she was safe, but this didn't sit right with Claire at all, who told Ron that he was not legally allowed to track her car as he didn't own it. The vehicle was in Claire's name and it was listed in their postnuptial agreement as being hers. Ronald, however, believes that he half owns this vehicle as they had been married. Now, it wasn't just GPS trackers that he tried to plant on Claire. He'd also tried to install a child safety app on her phone, which allowed him to see everything she was doing, including reading her text messages. Thankfully, Claire was able to cancel and remove this app as Ronald had actually used her PayPal account to subscribe to this app on her phone. The degree of control that Ronald tried to maintain over Claire got worse. If she tried to go to a concert, or if she went to a concert or went anywhere with her friends, Ronald would text and call her continually and accuse her of being with a guy, which, is very rich considering the fact that he brought a woman into their relationship and had continued an intimate relationship with this other woman the entire time. Kai was forced to send pictures of her friends with her to prove who she was with and constantly had to give reassurances. On some days, when Claire had been at work, Ronald would call her up and ask her if she was really still at work. He'd even installed cameras inside of their home that Claire hadn't been allowed access to, and he used these cameras to listen in on the conversations that Claire was having in her own home. On top of that, he would record her phone conversations that she'd been having with her friends about how upset she was about this other woman, and Ronald would take these recordings and send them to Angela, the other woman, completely without Claire's consent. On one occasion, Claire didn't respond to Ron's text message, and Ron thought she hadn't shown him, quote, the respect that he thinks he deserves, and so he threatened to take away her car and phone. It had been that August of 2019 when the nanny, Laura, had moved out of the apartment that was above the family's garage to her own place, though she did continue on as the nanny. Ronald had been waking Claire up multiple times throughout the night when he couldn't sleep, and if Claire went to go stay in this apartment above the garage to get away from him, he would spam call her throughout the night. In October of that year, in 2019, Ronald was asked by his employer to take family medical leave while the investigation into the claims brought against him continued, and Ronald agreed to do so, starting that leave a few weeks later. Though before he did, on the 10th of November, Ronald was asked to announce that he was stepping down as corporate medical director by his employer, to which Ronald refused to do so. And so, the following day, on November 11th, Ronald was removed from this position by his employer, who had decided to suspend the position entirely. Shortly thereafter, Ronald began his family medical leave, though it must be noted that he did continue to work for pediatrics in a lesser role and in some capacity. In January of 2020, Claire managed to find a job as a credentialing specialist at a local hospital, and she had got this second job due to the fact that she felt that she needed to protect herself and save money so that she can make it on her own if she needed to. She did have a house that she had owned prior to getting married to Ronald, which she had rented out for the duration of their marriage, and she'd begun to make plans to move back into that property if she needed to. On the 19th of March 2020, Ronald sent Claire a text in which he said, quote, I'm going to take your phone every day when you get home if you continue this behaviour. I will also take your car from you if you continue to ignore my requests. I don't want to take more difficult measures, Claire, but you are leaving me no choice. Claire responded, Ron, you are out of line and you are getting scary. Stop the threats. Later in the conversation, Ronald would respond, there is nothing scary about what I'm proposing. To which Claire replied, yes, you are getting extremely scary. You can't hold someone hostage by taking their phone and car. They are mine and I have free will. Leave me alone. You are acting crazy. Less than a month later, on the 11th of April, Claire found a second GPS tracker on her vehicle. On the 20th of May, a package was delivered to the family home from the website spycenter.com. Claire immediately looked up this website to find out that it sold a multitude of audio recorders as well as video gadgets and GPS trackers. She didn't want to anger Ronald by opening the package, and so she feared what had been inside. On the 12th of June, a third GPS tracker was found by Claire on her car, and she knew that it was time to get out. She had had enough. And on the 19th of June, Claire filed for divorce, stating that the marriage was irretrievably broken. The following day, on the 20th, Claire moved back into her house and got away from the abusive situation that she had found herself in. It must be noted that during this entire period, Ronald continued his relationship with Angela, the other woman he'd brought into the marriage. On the 8th of December in 2020, Ronald was called into a meeting with the new corporate medical director at his place of work, and he was told that he was being terminated immediately. When he asked why, they responded, quote, I think you know why. In the days that followed, Ronald sent a series of obsessive and harassing text messages to Claire. So many so that I have 74 screenshots of those text messages. It's clear to see that Ronald's mental state was unraveling, as he had not only lost his job, but lost his marriage, and he was losing control, something he strived for. He continued to try to win Claire back over text messages and even invited her on a trip to Mexico that he was going on with Angela, the other woman, and Angela's children. Claire obviously refused to go. The Mexico trip had been planned for early April to April 11th. Though just the week before, on Friday the 2nd of April 2021, Claire was contacted by the British Broadcasting Corporation, otherwise known as the BBC, about an alleged hit that had been ordered on her. The journalist Carl Miller from the BBC had been conducting an investigation for a podcast series related to murder for hire on the dark web, and they had located a dark web internet site that offered murder for hire services in exchange for cryptocurrency. And I did actually reach out to a contact that I have at the BBC who works in the podcasting department. They confirms that Carl Miller had likely been working on this story, and that the BBC ended up dropping the entire podcast series that they were working on due to the legal issues and things like that, and it ended up being picked up by Wondery, who published it, and I'll leave a link down in the description below if you're interested in listening to that series. But what the BBC had uncovered through a source unknown had been messages from a user identifying themselves as Scar215, ordering a hit on Claire. This user had provided the dark website admins with information about Claire's work and her schedule. Claire, when she got this information through her attorney, contacted the FBI, who opened a case on the 5th of April 2021. Transcripts of the messages were passed on to the FBI, who sprung into action. Using blockchain analysis, they were able to follow the trail of Bitcoin that had been sent as part of this hit order, and they followed the trail back to Coinbase.com, which is a company that operates a cryptocurrency exchange platform. Basically, it's a website where you can go and buy Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency. They contacted Coinbase.com with warrants around the 9th of April in order to get account records associated with transactions linked to the user Scar215 and the order of the hit. And as it turns out, the funds associated with the transaction hashes, that is, with every transaction of Bitcoin, a unique hash, so a big old random string of letters, is generated that can be used to identify that transaction. And the funds associated with that transaction hash were found to have been sent from a Coinbase account in the name of Ron Ilg. The account also had Ronald's phone number, email address, and social security number attached to it. The FBI learned that Ronald had used Coinbase.com to transfer approximately $56,308.12 into an escrow in order to pay for hits that he had ordered. And they confirmed the timing and value of those transactions as corresponding with the messages that had been obtained by the BBC. The FBI launched into action. They knew that Ronald had a trip to Mexico from early April to April 11th, and by that point, Ronald had already been in Mexico. Now, interestingly, on the 8th of April, Claire received a text message from Ron's girlfriend, Angela, who was with him in Mexico with her children, in which she indicated that strange stuff had happened. Quote, "Some strange stuff has happened while we have been here. I need to talk to you ASAP when we get back." The authorities knew that Ronald and Angela would be landing at Spokane International Airport on the 11th of April 2021, returning from their trip to Mexico. It had been at approximately 5 p.m. on the 11th of April when Ronald, Angela, and Angela's children returned to the Spokane International Airport, arriving on a Alaskan Airlines flight, which taxied to Concourse C. As Ronald, Angela, and Angela's children exited the aircraft and walked towards the baggage claim area, an FBI agent approached Ronald, introduced himself, and asked if Ronald would be willing to speak with the FBI. Ronald agreed to voluntarily speak with the FBI in an airport conference room that was just off the main hallway leading to the baggage claim. It must be noted that this interview was completely voluntary, and he could leave at any point. None of the doors were locked at all. During this interview, the FBI asked Ronald some background questions, which led into a question about whether Ronald had transacted in Bitcoin. It was at this point that Ronald asked whether he should have an attorney present, and the agents informed him that it was up to him and that they couldn't give him legal advice. Shortly after, the FBI informed Ronald that they had a warrant for his mobile phone. They told him that they could have it forensically imaged there and then if he had been willing to wait, or they could take the phone away and send off to be imaged. Ronald decided to let them do it then and there as he waited. It was as this conversation was happening that Ronald revealed that he had something to share with them. Quote, "There's one thing that I will share with you since I don't have my lawyer, but I did put it on there whilst I was in Mexico. I will read it to you because you're going to see it anyway. I have occasionally visited the dark web over the last couple of years and out of curiosity. One of the websites he'd come across on the dark web had listed sites for Hitman," he explained. Ronald told the FBI that he saw one customer ask on a forum there whether he could order a hit on himself and make it look like an accident. He explained that the administration of that site confirmed that it could be arranged and that the customer wanted his life insurance to pay out to his family, hence why it needed to look like an accident. Ronald told the FBI, quote, "So about 6 to 8 weeks ago, my depression was probably at its worst, and I hate to admit, but I constantly contemplated suicide." Ronald went on to state that this idea played on his mind, ordering a hit on himself so that his family could have the payout of insurance money. Quote, "I visited this site again, started an email thread with the particular hitman. After many discussions and about how and when and where, I loaded up my Bitcoin account, transferred it to them. But I was stupid. So ignorantly, It was not an escrow account. It started at $10,000, but quickly they went to $26,000. They said for it to be done right, it would need a bigger team and need more and more. Ronald explained that he didn't have an easy way to quickly transfer the Bitcoin and that it took ages for cash to become Bitcoin. That Coinbase took weeks and that Bitcoin ATMs had a limit to how much you could transfer from them. Eventually, after a lot of back and forth, Ronald explains that the other party backed out and apparently threatened him by saying that it was interesting information to pass along to the authorities. Ronald told them that his depression hadn't been getting any better over the past couple of weeks. Quote, "Nothing was going right. I cried almost every night being alone. Just being alone in my house is just torture. It's just torture. I can't describe it." He told them that he went looking for somebody who could help him orchestrate an accident. He ended up speaking with people who he believed were from a Mexican cartel. This new website had their own escrow, and there was an independent escrow, and they would be able to release Bitcoin to the hitman depending on the outcome. Ronald explained that his Bitcoin transactions had been as a result of sending Bitcoin to this new escrow for a hit on himself so that his family could get insurance money. Which, I mean, firstly, why are you admitting to conspiracy to commit insurance fraud in front of the FBI? Ronald explains that he had a second mobile phone which he used to communicate with this second hitman website, and that Ronald's girlfriend Angela had discovered this second phone and thrown it into a pool and destroyed it because she had believed Ron had been using it to speak with other women. Ronald told the FBI that all his information to do with that was on this second phone and was subsequently destroyed. The FBI asked him what his username was on the site, to which Ronald replied, quote, "That was on the phone too, and I'm trying to remember what it was. Scar, I think. Scar, yeah, it was Scar and 2 something, but it was, again, like I said, on that phone. It was on that phone." After a brief conversation about his experience in Mexico and how he felt that the staff at the hotel that he'd been staying at had been in the know about this hit, the FBI asked, quote, "Were you concerned as you were scheming out this suicide plan / accident plan that in the investigation afterwards, somebody would find the document that you wrote that would undo everything that you orchestrated? I was going to delete that." The FBI agent told Ronald that they did investigations on the dark web. Quote, "We know your moniker is Scar215, and we have your transcript, as you have communicated with the cartel. So the document that you've read is a great document to deflect. It's a great document to explain away why the Bitcoin was transferred, but it doesn't match up with the transcript. Any explanation for that?" In layman's terms, the FBI called Ronald out on his complete bullshit story. He had tried to manipulate the truth, tried to make himself seem like the victim here. So what exactly did the transcript say? What exactly is the truth here? Ronald had ordered not just one hit, but 2 hits. On the 31st of December 2020, at 4:30 in the afternoon, Ronald placed his first order for a hit. But this hit hadn't been for his ex-wife, Claire. No. It had been for an ex-co-worker of his, a co-worker who he believed had been behind the harassment complaints that had ultimately seen him lose his job. Ronald, using the nickname Scar215, sent an order to admin internet killers in which he identified this victim, who we'll call Lucy for the purposes of privacy protection, as the target, and given them her home address. Ronald then placed approximately $1,984.45 worth of Bitcoin into an escrow account as payment for the hit. Quote, "The target should be given a significant beating that is obvious. It should injure both hands significantly or break the hands. It must be noted that the target, Lucy, would have been a doctor or medical professional, and so she needed her hands to work." The order was received by the admin internet killer's dark website, and after some back and forth, Ronald provided them with more information about Lucy, including a photograph of her. The admin responded to him and told him, quote, "The hitman said it will be done soon." On the 23rd of February 2021, at 9:14 p.m, Ronald placed an order for another hit. Quote, "I need a rush job for next week. I need the target kidnapped for 5 to 7 days. While being held, she is given at least daily doses of heroin. She is also persuaded to do things within 2 weeks. 1. Stop all court proceedings. 2. Return to your husband and the chaos you created. 3. Tell absolutely no one about this. Also, the team should plant heroin and use needles with her DNA inside." After about 7 days, she is returned to her home. This was a hit order, with the target being Claire. the person he was, at that point, undergoing divorce proceedings with. Ronald then sent additional information in efforts to hire someone to kidnap, assault, extort, and drug Claire. Further, he actually ended up cancelling the assault and beating of Claire as he believed the hitman was taking too long to complete the job. On the 29th of March, Ronald signed up to a different website on the dark web that was allegedly associated with a Mexican cartel. It was on this website that he ordered the hit on Claire for a second time, quote, "The target destroyed 2 families and walked away as if she did nothing. I want the target kidnapped for 7 days. While being held, she'll be given injections of heroin at least 2 times per day. She will be taught to do it herself, and pics and videos of her doing on her own should be collected. Also, while being held, all means necessary will be done to get the following goals within 2 weeks of her release. First, cancel all court proceedings immediately. Second, return to the chaos she left with her husband and the third party she invited into the house. And third, she will tell absolutely no one about her kidnapping and goals. She should be told that her family's health, including her father and her kids, depend on her completing these rules. It would be unfortunate if her older boy became addicted to heroin, or her dad be severely beaten, or her dog be slaughtered. Any and all persuasion should be used. This needs to be done in 2 weeks. I would prefer to use an independent escrow service. Can you give me 3 different ones and how exactly it works using an independent service?" It must be noted that Claire would confirm to the FBI that she has a dog and that her father lived in the Spokane area. Ronald continued, quote, "I am hesitant to use so much money with your escrow. At one point, I tried to claim some Bitcoin from this escrow and it didn't go anywhere despite waiting 2 or 3 days. I will deposit the amount needed if I can be reassured I will get it back if the job is not completed." It must also be noted that the first hit order against Lucy, his co-worker, was also cancelled. He continued to tell the admins of this site, quote, "I'm looking for someone who can do this job around April 9th to the 18th. If you identify someone who can do it, I'll provide the Bitcoin needed to start. If it goes well within the time frame, I will at least double the pay." Ronald then proceeded to send even more information and Bitcoin for this hit on Claire. On the 31st of March 2021, Ronald communicated with someone who used the nickname Juan and gave over specific identification information for Claire, as well as further details on Claire's schedule and work location. This additional correspondence actually described a bonus that would be paid if the goals of the abduction were met. Further, Ronald demanded that Claire return to her husband, which was him, Ronald, and engage in sexual intercourse with him at least 3 times during the first 2 weeks after returning. The FBI did confirm Claire's schedule and work location and the identifiable information about her that Ronald disclosed. Bitcoin transactions were also determined to have been carried out at around this time to the agreed escrow services. These messages between Ronald and the Hitman website continued from April 2nd through April 8th, where Ronald discussed an issue with the funds in escrow and additional arrangements to have Claire kidnapped during the weekend of April 9th to April 11th. On the 7th of April, Ronald sent, quote, $5,000 is on the way to your escrow. A new escrow in the other will be established with $10K by tomorrow. Please alert your guy that it will be ready and that the full $40K bonus escrow will be filled by the time it will be needed if the bonus goals are achieved. The job needs to start this weekend for the timing to work. Thanks. The following day, on the 8th, he sent the message, quote, "Please have your man begin this weekend and send a timeline and pics and videos the day he starts as verification. I will do my best to answer any questions in a timely manner." By that point, the FBI had been investigating the hits that had been ordered, and they had already analysed the transcripts provided by the BBC. Additional evidence was collected by the FBI that corroborated that Ronald had been the one who had sent the messages on the dark web using the moniker SCAR215. On the 6th of April, the FBI interviewed Claire, and she provided them with the background information about her relationship with Ronald. She explained to the FBI that following the birth of their child in May of 2018, Ronald located Angela on the internet and invited her into the relationship with him and Claire. As time passed, Claire became increasingly uncomfortable with the relationship. She then explained that she was currently involved in contentious divorce proceedings with Ronald and that they split custody of their child. During this interview, Claire gave the FBI a statement and supporting text messages from their nanny. In these text messages, Ronald discussed a, quote, kidnapping scenario as part of some sexual fantasy. On the 7th of April, Claire provided the FBI with text messages between her and Angela, Ronald's girlfriend. The messages, which occurred sometime prior to the 16th of February, contained screenshots of texts between Angela and Ronald, which had been forwarded to Claire. In these messages, Angela stated that Ronald, who had been saved in Angela's phone as Sir, hired someone to hurt Claire, quote, from the dark web using Bitcoin. Ronald responded by denying that he had hired anyone, claiming, quote, the dark web is all a scam, as all the studies show. Also, on the 7th of April, the FBI interviewed Lucy, the former co-worker who Ronald had hired a hitman to physically assault by breaking her hands. Lucy told the FBI that she had previously worked for Ronald for several years and that he did not like her, and that she suspected he thought she had something to do with the complaint that was filed against him. Lucy surmised that Ronald may have faulted her for him not obtaining a position at another hospital in the region where she had worked. She also told them that on or around November of 2020, Ronald had reached out to her regarding employment and to, quote, bury the hatchet, but Lucy did not respond. The FBI concluded that based on the interview with Lucy, Ronald's alleged animosity towards Lucy appeared to have provided a motive for Ronald to hire someone to hurt her. Now, after the FBI interviewed Ronald at the airport after he had landed from Mexico and he had tried to claim he had hired Hitman to kill him and no one else, they asked him if he had altered his will or updated the beneficiaries of his life insurance, to which Ronald said that he had not. The FBI also spoke with Angela, Ronald's girlfriend, at the airport, and she told the FBI that she had given information to Claire about a confrontation she had with Ronald regarding his dark web activities and his intent to scare Claire. She further told the FBI that Ronald had paid someone to scare Claire. The FBI asked Angela about Ronald's claims that he'd gone on the dark web to gamble, to which she said that he had gone with Ronald to Las Vegas before, and while they were there, Ronald didn't gamble at all. She also revealed to the FBI that Ronald had told her about his alleged desire to locate someone on the dark web that would kill him so that his children would get his inheritance. Angela explained that she had thrown Ronald's phone into a resort pool after suspecting that he had been speaking with other women. She had found the device during the trip and was unaware of its existence prior. Ronald responded to what Angela did by attacking her and saying something to the effect of, quote, we're in Mexico, I can do whatever I want to you, and, quote, I'm working with the Mexican mafia. Ronald later commented to Angela that he was arranging a hit on himself with that phone. On the 12th of April 2021, the morning after the FBI spoke with Ronald and confronted him at the airport, they received a call from the Spokane County Sheriff's Office in which they revealed that Ronald had attempted to kill himself. The sheriff's deputy reported that he had received a call for a possible assault at Ronald's home. Upon arrival, they located Ronald with a black eye, laying unconscious on the kitchen floor. They then located a medication sheet inside the home that indicated that there were approximately 46 missing pills of Xanax. In the kitchen area where Ronald had been found, there had been located an apparent suicide note, which had been placed next to the business card of the FBI agent that had interviewed him the previous day. The suicide note contained the following messages to both Angela and Claire. Angela, I love you with everything I have. I'm sorry. Please remember the good. I loved no other more than you. Claire, I love you also. You mocked my love. You made fun of it. Why? You laughed with your family and co-workers. Please care for our son and love him like I do. On the other side of the suicide note had been the following message, which had appeared to have been addressed more generally. Quote, I'm about to drift off to sleep. I pray that God forgives me. I pray with all my heart that he does. I did this not for me, but for all of you. You can move on faster and easier and quicker. I just wanted to norm back, but I couldn't see the path. I fucked it up. Irreparable fuck up. Claire, if it is allowed in my will, please share half with Angela, somehow. She deserved that. Claire, you have a big heart that I destroyed. Ronald did survive this attempt on his own life, and he was taken to hospital to recover. While he was there, he actually made incriminating statements regarding information that he had previously provided to the FBI. He was overheard speaking on the phone saying, quote, do I tell the attorney the story I start with? Or do I tell him everything and say, what do I do? On the 16th of April 2021, Ronald Ilg was arrested and charged with one felony count of attempted kidnapping. He was held in custody at Spokane County Jail. After being taken into custody, Ronald's criminal behavior did not stop. Instead, he attempted to tamper with at least one of the witnesses against him, begging this key witness to marry him so that he could have control over whether she would testify, which was a really fucked up law in the state of Washington, I might add. If this witness did so, Ronald had offered to pay tuition for her children to attend private schools in Spokane. Ronald then directed this witness to burn the letter he had written to her with this proposal in, aka telling her to destroy the evidence of his efforts to tamper with the witness. The court proceedings in this case were fairly long, and there was a lot of information I had to admit from this coverage that was in the court records. But ultimately, on the 10th of August 2022, a plea agreement was signed by Ronald in this case. This plea agreement saw Ronald agree to plead guilty to counts 1 and 4 of the superseding indictments, which saw Ronald being charged with threats in interstate commerce. This meant that Ronald had agreed that for count 1, first, being on or about December 31st, 2020, and continuing until on or about February 24, 2021, in the Eastern District of Washington, Ronald knowingly transmitted an electronic communication in interstate commerce containing a threat to injure victim 1, who we've called Lucy. Second, the communication was transmitted for the purpose of issuing a threat, or with knowledge that the electronic communication would be viewed as a threat. And for count 4, first, beginning on or about February 15th, 2021, and continuing until on or about April 11th, 2021, in the Eastern District of Washington, Ronald knowingly transmitted an electronic communication in interstate commerce containing a threat to kidnap victim 2, who we've called Claire. Second, the communication was transmitted for purposes of issuing a threat, or with knowledge that the electronic communication would be viewed as a threat. In the sentencing for Ronald, the victim impact statement read, "The victim impact in this case demonstrates the seriousness and the egregiousness of Ronald's offences. He set into motion a course of action that, if successful, would have resulted in his ex-wife's kidnapping, her drug addiction, harm to her family, and possibly even his ex-wife's death at the hands of a hired assassin. Ronald even attempted to have a professional colleague physically assaulted in efforts to destroy her livelihood. Ronald endangered his children, and he even forced an intimate partner into a dark pit for hours as he sought to maintain control over his female victims. Although the plan ultimately was thwarted thanks to an informant who led the FBI to Ronald's activities, each of the victims suffered severe emotional and psychological harm. On the 24th of January 2023, the judgment was made for the sentencing. And for counts 1 and 4, threats in interstate commerce, Ronald was sentenced to 96 months imprisonment. He is currently being held at Sandstone FCI. Ronald did try to appeal the sentence, but his appeal was dismissed. And honestly, I hope someone behind those bars steps in, does a little something there, because there are some things that are in the case files that I genuinely can't discuss on this YouTube channel that involved his young son. And that's the scope of what I'll say about that. And I just really hope that someone behind bars in there is, yeah. Anyway, that's everything that I have for you in this case before I say anything else. Thank you so much for watching this true crime video, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon if you want to see more true crime content just like this one. As per usual, you can find links to all my socials in the description, and if you have a case that you want me to cover, you can go to requestacase.com and send in your case submissions there. And with all that being said, I will see you in the next case.